Where do you want to sit here? Yeah.
I need my technology. What happened to my, oh, I need that. Not that I don't have a loud enough voice. Mine too. Thank you, Secretary, for joining us today. We've had a wonderful morning already. We've honored 16 leaders to learn from, and now we're going to grab a half an hour of your time to go over some questions. Some of this I said last night to some of you, so I'm sorry it's a little bit of a redundancy. But I do believe we've hit this really spectacular moment in time in the arc of efforts to improve schools with a 30-plus year kind of history when you even just go back to a nation at risk. There's certainly some negative things having to do with tight budgets, but with that also comes the opportunity for creativity and innovation and trying some new things. But there are a lot of other things, policy changes that are, let's just say, for many people seen as leverage points for again spurring change. Nearly universal focus on college and career-ready standards, most especially in the form of Common Core, the whole approach to next generation assessments. We can poke on that a little bit. And then renewed attention to the human capital part of the equation. And that's something I'd really like to push on today. I also just mentioned that I do appreciate that there's a greater emphasis being placed again on issues related to students, their engagement, their motivation, the climate they encounter in schools, the culture of schools. So I think it really is a spectacular moment in time, and then over the next year or two, we're going to see some very interesting things play out. So let me ask you to begin by talking about the role that you think education leadership and the development of education leadership plays in the equation of improving schools. It's not meant to be a softball. Of course you think it's important, but what do you think specifically the federal role in that is, given that these are leaders who need support?
Let me just first quickly thank Ed Week for shining a spotlight on our great educational leaders from across the country, and just congratulate them. Please give them another round of applause for all their hard work. It's a pretty spectacular group, and I always say we just don't ever do enough in education to shine a spotlight on what's working and success and learn from it. So just really, really appreciate the leadership. I know this is the first year, and hopefully you'll do a lot more of this going forward. So great to get in the game. So one of the joys of my job is I get to visit, I should at some point count, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of schools over the past couple of years. I'm in schools 2-3 times a week. I was actually in a school the other day that's located in a jail. So it's a different type school. I go to great schools, I go to mediocre schools, I go to schools that will break your heart. I've yet to go to a great school that didn't have a great principal. I keep looking for that school. I don't think I'm going to find it. And leadership matters tremendously. And again, state the obvious. What I've also seen over time is that it can take 8, 10, 12 years to build a school from okay to good to fantastic. And if you don't have the right succession planning, if that principal leaves, the wrong person comes in, that school can be a disaster in like 7 months, 8 months. It is so much harder to build something up than to tear it down. So obviously for us, we're also at a reflection point, 4 years in, very thankful to have the opportunity to keep doing this work. One area where I don't think we've done enough is to support great school leadership. And so we want to invest more. We want to invest in the current generation of principals. We have a baby boomer generation that's going to age out. How do we attract the next generation? We have 100,000 schools. If we had 100,000 A-plus principals, I would retire and go to the Bahamas. My job would be done. But we're not to that point yet. So I want to challenge us to do more. Principals are asked to do more than ever before with less resources. The job is getting harder and harder. Principals are absolutely CEOs. They have to be instructional leaders. They have to manage all the HR in their building. They have to work with the community. There's a million things they're asked to do. We have to better train. We have to better support. We have to provide better mentoring and career ladders. And again, arguably, there's, if you want to attract and retain great teachers, you need a good principal. Good principals do that. Bad principals run off good talent. They're threatened by it.
So are there specific things that are either included in the budget or that you see proposing over the next year or two specifically on education leadership?
So I think, again, we've underinvested in this area, and we're actually asking Congress and We've got a great champion here and has been a fantastic partner. Congress is difficult these days, and not to change subjects, the gun vote yesterday was extraordinarily disturbing to me, and I'm happy to talk about that more later. But we're asking Congress for a couple $100 additional to put behind supporting school leaders. We think that's the right thing to do.
How much?
I don't have the exact number in my head, but a couple $100 additional. We're looking to significantly increase funding to support principal leadership.
So how would you characterize where we are in efforts to improve schools right now? Whether you want to answer that through the lens of politics or the lens of actual work on the ground. I mean, how do you describe this arc?
I think you described it pretty well. I think we're at an inflection point. The fact that we've seen 46 states raise standards voluntarily, no one, all the pundits, all the experts, skeptics, whoever, no one predicted that would happen. Really tough economic times, many places the toughest situation financially, unfortunately, we've seen in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That's hard. But everywhere I go, I don't see people making excuses or not working. Sorry. I don't see people making excuses or trying to find ways to not move forward. There's a tremendous hunger to get better. I think we have to celebrate the progress, the fact that high school graduation rates are at the highest point in 3 decades. That's an extraordinary step in the right direction. The fact that college going rates are up, Hispanic enrollment in college is up 25% in the past couple years. That's a huge deal. The fact, and folks may not know this, we have 700,000 fewer high school students in quote-unquote dropout factories in 2011 versus 2008. That's a huge, huge step in the right direction. So lots of progress, but at the end of the day, we have so far to go.
Well, so, I have a ton of questions, and I'm now going to go out of order because, as you know as well as I do, the perception is that we're not winning this. Yeah. And the public and political will is not being built in the name of improving schools and improving outcomes for kids. I mean, how are we going to turn that around?
So just again, to get the facts on the table, right now we're 14th in the world in college graduation rates. One generation ago, we were first. So that is no badge of honor. I don't think any of us want to stand up and say, hooray, we're 14th. That's not what we aspire to do. Despite reductions in dropout rates and increase in graduation rates, we still have about a 25% dropout rate in this country. That's 1 million young people we're losing from our schools to our streets that don't have any hope of getting a good paying job in the legal economy. So we should celebrate the progress, we should celebrate the momentum, but this is not there's no mission accomplished banner back here. That's not where we're at. We have to get better faster despite the tough economic times. What I think we're missing, and I would love to, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but regardless of politics and ideology, and I could care less across the political spectrum, I just wish a lot more people went to the voting booth at every level, local, state, and national, with education sort of as their 1, 2, or 3. And that's just not the case. So the vast majority of every politician says they're pro-education. No one's going to say they're anti-education. But frankly, the vast majority of politicians don't do much at any level behind this. And again, hold me and the president accountable for trying to walk the walk. You watch the presidential debates. How much did education come up? Didn't come up. Why not? Because we don't demand that it come up. And regardless of politics, if a lot more political leaders took educational improvement as part of their core responsibility, regardless of who won or lost, our country would be in a better spot.
So, Secretary, you have a bully pulpit, and I've heard you on this very issue many times, and appreciate that there is some benefit to the messaging that comes from the bully pulpit. Specifically, otherwise, are there things the department, or at the federal level could be doing, though, to move the needle on the dial with respect to what people understand or don't about what it takes to improve schools?
So I'm happy to get suggestions and ideas. I think we try and go out there every single day and talk about what is working, talk honestly about the challenges. I think we've tried to bring a level of honesty and talk about brutal truths that sometimes are a little bit uncomfortable for folks to talk about. And I think the biggest thing we can do is to try and better inform the public to create that sense of urgency, challenge the status quo when things aren't working, and celebrate success where it is happening. What you also have is you have a set of folks who just think it's impossible. And if you really get down to it, who just think that poor children can't learn or black and brown children can't learn, and continuing to put the lie in those myths and those stereotypes is hugely important.
And I'm sure there are people in the room who would, and I'll try to channel some of this, say, but we don't have the capacity to do this, whether it be money or other kinds of resources, and you're at the federal level. Let me back up. You can be thinking about that. But what do you think the federal role in education is versus the state role and local role?
So I think about that every single day, and frankly came to Washington very skeptical about the federal role, because the federal government, my Department of Education, was not always my friend when I ran the Chicago public schools, far from it, frankly. Just a quick story, I almost had to sue my Department of Education for the right to tutor 25,000 of my kids after school. It's the craziest thing. I won that fight by the federal government telling me I couldn't tutor my kids who were behind and wanted to work hard and wanted to do an extra hour of instruction after
Because
school.
you couldn't channel money in that direction?
They didn't say we couldn't do it. And luckily I had the data to prove that we could do it well, and thank goodness they listened. But why was I having to fight for the right to tutor my kids after school? It's just like insane. So I came here with more than a little bit of skepticism. I think what we can do is we can spur innovation. We can share best practices. We can challenge folks to raise the bar. I'm a much bigger believer in carrots than sticks. I don't think you can beat people into doing things. That's not the right way to do it. But by providing real incentives at every level, at the local level, at the school level, the local level, the district level, the state level, we've seen this massive amount of change. And in fact, I don't give our department, I give us very little of the credit. I think what we have done is create the space in the room to unleash this tremendous amount of innovation, to see the great work going on. And all this leadership is not coming from me, it's not coming from Washington, it's coming from these guys and their colleagues around the country who, despite the tough economic times, despite the challenges, despite all the stuff going on in families and communities, are finding ways to do spectacular things for kids who need a chance.
So where do you think the capacity gaps are in being able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Make this work?
Well, sadly, there are lots of capacity gaps. And so again, people love, want me to give sort of glib, simple answers. I just, it's much more complex than that. So let me just sort of walk through many capacity gaps. We have a huge number of children who enter kindergarten a year to a year and a half behind. That's an opportunity gap. I don't know if you call it capacity opportunity. So as you know, we're making a huge push. The president's $75 billion to put behind high-quality pre-K. I think it's arguably one of the best gifts we can give to the country. So that's one huge gap there. Secondly, you look at some of those countries that are higher performing than us, they recruit 100% of their teachers from the top third of graduating classes, and some recruit 100% of the teachers from the top 10% of graduating classes. We're not anywhere close to that. So our pool of talent coming in, how we train those teachers is much less rigorous than in other countries. We don't begin to pay our teachers enough money. And I've argued very publicly that we should double starting teacher salaries and have a much higher upside. Great principals should make a lot more money. So our human capital, our talent pool, we don't attract the right folks, we don't support them, we lose too many of the good ones, we don't have career ladders. So there are huge capacity issues there on the teacher side and on the principal side. We don't invest enough in education in this country, and we need to invest more. And we need to invest not in the status quo, but in a vision of reform, and we need to get better. Relative to other countries, it's interesting. We actually invest more than most other countries on average, but we're near the bottom in terms of what we spend on the most disadvantaged kids. So in our country, basically the wealthiest who have the most get more, and the poorest, the most disadvantaged who need the most, get the least. Right. And then we wonder why we have achievement gaps. So that's a huge capacity issue. Going forward, I think technology can be a great equalizer, and I think technology can be a way to help children, whether it's inner city urban or rural or remote or Native American reservations, to learn 24/7, anytime, anywhere, and we have some issues there. So there's a lot to throw at you, but we have lots of capacity gaps, and we need to address all of them at the same time.
So trying to bridge both these questions of capacity and the federal role with Race to the Top and the waivers that followed to be able to spur, incentivize change, I suppose, or allow for certain kinds of change. How do you characterize the federal commitment to the very things you were talking about in the context of, be the specific things you're trying to roll out.
So I'll walk through those two things specifically because we were trying to accomplish very different goals. So Race to the Top was actually trying to incentivize just a couple principles that we thought were important. We thought having high standards was important, not dumbing down standards, having students truly be college and career ready. We thought having good data systems so that we can understand students' progress over time and just having transparency was important. We thought, human capital, great teachers, great principals make a difference. That was important. We thought turning around underperforming schools. It's hard, it's controversial, it's complex. I didn't want to throw away another generation of kids. And the fact, again, in 3 short years, 700,000 less kids in these dropout factories, that's huge. So that's what we were trying to do with Race to the Top. With the waivers, I just think No Child Left Behind, and we'll have obviously a divergence of opinion in a good room like this. I thought No Child Left Behind was basically broken. Should have been fixed a long time ago. Congress, unfortunately, is pretty broken as well, dysfunctional. So what we tried to do, our plan A was to have Congress fix the law and fix it in a bipartisan way. That didn't work. So we wanted then to partner directly with states, move away from a focus on one test score, look at growth and gain, look at long-term graduation rates and reductions in dropout rates and college going rates, and trying to unleash a level of creativity and innovation. No Child Left Behind law passed, whatever it was, 12, 13 years ago. We've learned so much in 12, 13 years to still be going by the same rules. Lots of perverse incentives in that law. I don't think it was necessarily bad intentions, but it just didn't make sense to have our kids and our educators stymied, held back, stifled by that was crazy to me. So that's why we've done the waiver.
So I'm going to ask you to put a prediction on a piece of paper, and then we'll put it in an envelope when ESEA will be reauthorized.
I'd ask the congressman to give me his advice. Short answer is I don't know. I'll say literally in the past couple of weeks I've had very encouraging meetings with Senator Harkin and Senator Alexander who are working on it. Congress, again, I don't want the fact that we couldn't get background checks for criminals for guns yesterday. That's how can we do anything? To me, we're 90% of the public thinks that's the right thing. If we can't jump over that bar, something like this that is absolutely more complex and a greater difference of opinion, I worry. But we stand ready and willing. Today, tomorrow, next week, next month. I would say, when if Congress wants to get their act together and work in a bipartisan way, there's no better issue than around education. We have to take the politics and silliness out. But yesterday was deeply disturbing to me. I got to be honest with you, deeply disturbing.
Do you think it'll happen in in the Obama administration?
I desperately hope so. And again, waivers were a Band-Aid, were a temporary solution. And if it happens tomorrow, great. If it happens 3 months from now, 6 months, a year from now. But do I want to walk out the door and not have it reauthorized? I don't see any big upside to doing that.
So
I'm sorry, quick thing I'll say is that the goal for me is not to reauthorize. The goal is to have a better law. And so the worst thing you want is a worse law. And so when Congress gets around to doing it, what I've said, the only huge benefit that I didn't fully anticipate to the waivers is there's some amazing ideas coming from states, and some, frankly, aren't so amazing, but there's some great, great stuff there. And if Congress takes the best ideas from the best states, that gets really interesting to me. If this is some junky law we can't support, well, the goal is not to, we'll stick with waivers.
Right. So turning to every state in the union has embraced the idea of a college and career readiness agenda. 45 states and District of Columbia have expressed that in Common Core standards. How do you describe the politics of that? And right before you walked in, one of our colleagues in the audience asked about what 3 things would you like to see changed in Common Core? So anyway, talk about Common Core.
So,
college and career readiness.
yeah, for me, the goal is less common, it's more high. And so Common Core is one way to get that lots of states embraced. But what was said is that if states don't want to do Common Core, just have your institution of higher education certify that if kids are graduating from high school, they don't have to take remedial classes. And so we just want a high bar. And the fact, again, one of the things that's most insidious to me about No Child Left Behind is we saw about 20 states dummy down standards to comply. So it made politicians look good. We were lying. We were lying to children and families, telling them they were doing well, and they weren't. And to me, it's like borderline criminal. And kids thinking they're on track to be successful, and they're not even close. So the adoption of higher standards, again, no one predicted it, no one thought it was possible, huge step in the right direction. let me be really clear, that's the easy part of things. The hard part is implementation. How you support teachers to teach to the higher bar, how you articulate this to parents, how you talk to students themselves about this. We have a lot of hard work. As I travel the country, you see a real divergence. You see some places where there's tremendous energy and folks are working together. There are other teachers that frankly feel pretty unsupported right now, and that's a real worry. And so again, yes, adoption, fantastic. That just gets you in the game. That's your ticket to entry. And now it's going to be a lot of hard work, not this year, but the next 5 years, the next 10 years, to implement, to teach that, to make adjustments. And the more we can empower great teachers to support one another, the more we can really talk to parents about this is what we're asking you to do differently. The more we have very honest conversations with students is this is how you have to think differently and work differently. We cannot over-communicate this. And again, if you ask most kids around the country, most parents, what are we asking you to do differently? I don't know if we'd get great answers. That's not their fault. That's our fault. We have to collectively, at the state level, local level, and everything we can, have people understand how to do this. And the final thing I'll say is this is going to be rocky. It's going to be bumpy. It's going to be hard. And things get a little tough. Okay, let's fix it. Let's not go back to the bad old days where we dummy things down. And so we need to stay the course, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, learn from our mistakes, and do this together.
Well, let me ask about the road, implementation road will be bumpy. And you are already, the administration is under attack, the federal government is under attack for overstepping its bounds. In light of that, what is the federal role in helping smooth that road on Common Core or college and career readiness implementation standards?
I think in these debates it's important to have facts. The fact is we didn't overstep our bounds. The fact is we didn't mandate this. The fact is that 46 states voluntarily adopted this. That's the fact.
Right. But, I mean, what can you do? I mean, you said before, sharing of information, even as the blowback will come, that you're somehow in cahoots with, certain people who are promoting an agenda. I mean, we get that too. I'm telling,
Yeah, again, so it's a fair debate. People are still debating whether the president was born in America. There's a set of facts and there's a set of conspiracy theories. And 46 states voluntarily adopted higher standards. If states want to tomorrow reverse that and adopt dummy-down standards, they have the right to do that. Is it good for their kids? I don't think so. Is it good for their state's economy? I don't think so. But if states want to tomorrow go back to the bad old days, they have every right to do that. And in fact, there's nothing I can do to stop it. That's for parents and community members to decide what do they want for their children.
So talk a little bit about the big backlash in the country right now to assessment, particularly high-stakes assessment with respect to kids and teachers, what went on in Atlanta, potentially in D.C. How do you describe the politics of that?
So I think in all this, again, it's so important to understand the nuances and the complexity. And I've always said there are two extremes, neither one of which I think are right. If you're basing everything on test scores, 100% on test scores, whether it's for kids or for teachers or for compensation, I think that's crazy. The other end of the spectrum is where you have student achievement and teacher evaluation that are 100% divorced from one another, where there's no correlation. And I think there's a common sense middle ground that folks are working towards. No one knows the perfect answer. I say in any real profession, and we have to elevate the teaching profession and make it a true profession, you have to look at multiple measures. And so you have to look at growth and gain, you have to look at observation, you have to survey students themselves. Every single one of us in this room know who those teachers were in our lives who made a huge difference and those that didn't. And so you have to be thoughtful. So there are many places that are doing this in a really, really thoughtful way. I promise you all of them in an imperfect way. But the fact of the matter is, for the first time in decades, this country is taking seriously the idea that great teachers matter, and that great principals matter, and that that talent matters. And so let's be thoughtful. Situation like Atlanta is heartbreaking, where you had a corrupt culture there. And for me, there were so many kids who needed additional help who didn't get that. That's the tragedy. And if we're not in education to help kids, what are we doing? So we should have zero tolerance for that kind of thing. But then the flip side is, okay, there are folks who say, well, that means we should do no assessments. We should have no idea where kids are throughout all testing. I can't support that. So again, there's a common sense middle ground that most folks are working in a very courageous quiet way, and we're getting there. And I think as a country, we're in a much better spot today than we were 5 years ago. And I hope 5 years from now, we'll be in a radically better spot because we're all learning from one another across districts, across states.
So is there a specific federal role in developing accountability systems that include these multiple measures? Would a new law, for instance, embrace those?
I think, again, I don't think anyone in this room, if we're honest, know what the perfect set of things there. What we see now is a huge amount of creativity and innovation at the state and local level. And so I think the best thing we can do at the federal level is to let this play out a little bit. And if stuff is looking good, let's shine a spotlight. If stuff is looking crazy, the Atlanta thing you can't support. There's a suit in Florida. I don't have any huge details, but I read there was a teacher who was evaluated based upon test scores at another school. That doesn't make any sense to me. That sounds a little crazy. So where things don't make sense, let's learn from it and let's figure it out a better way. But I think there's a huge amount of really good work going on around the country, and let's learn together. And again, I'm just really optimistic. I think a couple years from now we'll be in a radically different place. And if any one of us knew the perfect answer today, I don't think we're just not there yet. And the fact as a country we haven't had these conversations for 5 decades. Why is it taking so long? That's the part that's infuriating to me. We got to get it much better, faster, and that's what we're trying to do.
You talked almost at the beginning about the federal role in spurring innovation and maybe, including digital learning and other kinds of uses of technology. Characterize what that looks like for you day in and day out.
Yes. So again, this is why I just worry about our country, whether we're going to be a leader or be a laggard. And the fact of the matter is many of our international competitors, and I look more at this international benchmarks because that's where our kids are competing for jobs. They're not competing for jobs in their neighborhood or in their district or in their state. They're competing for jobs with children in India and China and Singapore and South Korea. And I want to keep those jobs here for our kids. Many of those countries are moving rapidly from print to digital. And the fact that kids are carrying around textbooks, the fact you sort of think about this, many states now still have 6 or 7 or 8 year textbook adoption cycles. The world is changing daily. It's mind-boggling. So I wish we had a huge pot of money to put behind that, but behind this we don't have that today. I'm working on some things, but not there yet. But in education, we do a very poor job of stopping spending. We're great at doing new things. We're not good at stopping doing certain things. And you have some very, very interesting districts, a minority of districts, we're not at a tipping point yet, but districts who have stopped buying textbooks and put all that money into technology. And you're starting to see some very, very, very encouraging increases in student achievement and graduation rates. Some folks worry this is somehow a threat to teachers. It's the opposite. Great teachers empowered by great technology is always going to be the answer. District like Mooresville, North Carolina is actually measuring teacher engagement, and teachers are much more supported, doing a much better job because of this. It's the furthest thing from a threat. So we need to do whatever we can to be helpful. We had a conversation last night with folks around E-rate, but having districts and states stop putting money into print and putting money into technology and digital, literally billions of dollars each year, I think going into something that's a bit of a dinosaur, frankly, at this point.
We've been kind of disrupted, right? Education Week.
Yes.
I feel you're
the whole industry.
exactly right.
Yeah.
We've got time for 2 or 3 questions, so I would love to open it up. This is a wonderful opportunity for us all. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you talked about the reauthorization, and with hopes that it will happen within this administration. I'm very passionate about STEM education. I'm from the National Science Teachers Association. So where do you see STEM education? Because reality is, when the first law was in place, it was very sad to see classrooms where, because a teacher's job is on the line, they focus on reading and mathematics, and students don't get the opportunity to get excited about science, meaning that they may not have the opportunity to choose that as a career if that's what they would have been interested in.
All right, and let me, sorry about that. Let me sort of separate out 2 issues. Reauthorization is clearly a part of this, and there were some disincentives in ESEA for STEM, and not just STEM, but for art and music and PE and recess, which I'm a big fan of, and other things. But I'm a big believer in, okay, we can sit around and wait for Congress to get its act together. What can we do? And I'm always just trying to move. We can't wait. We can't wait. So one thing you may have seen in the president's budget, and if not, we can give you lots of information. The president wants to make a huge play around STEM. And we don't need, frankly, reauthorization. It would help. We don't need it. And we're moving now. He is personally absolutely passionate about it. We literally met last week, walked through this in detail. He's asked, we've had a huge amount of spend across the administration for a couple of decades. It's been pretty diffuse and not focused, lots of individual interesting programs, but nothing critical mass. He's asking, which is hard to do sort of managerially or structurally, a massive consolidation. Frankly, wants our Department of Education to step up in a really big way behind a couple things. One is to create a master corps of teachers in STEM. We've had a shortage of STEM teachers for a long time. Pay them more money, have them mentor, have them help the next generation come up, make these guys real rock stars and shine a spotlight on them. We also, the big thing I've learned through Race to the Top and Promising Neighborhoods and Invest in Innovation Fund is our resources help, but our resources, the best thing we can do is catalyze great work at the local level. If it's us doing all of something, it just doesn't stick and we just don't have enough to do. And you've seen this amazing ground up stuff rather than top down. So what we want to do is sort of create these STEM innovation hubs around the community where, yes, we will invest, but we will only invest where higher education is at the plate and where the private sector is at the table and the K-12 and parents in the community. It's a totally different model, and so we're really excited about it. We can get you more information on it. And so I want to, yes, we want to reauthorize, but we're not waiting for authorization. We're moving right now, literally meeting with the president last week, and think we can do some really creative, good stuff to increase the number of young people who have a passion and a love of STEM.
I'm going to point to 3 people. You're going to ask your questions really quickly. We're going to see how quickly you can answer them.
I'll shorten my
or
answer,
at
sorry.
least, so 3 people. Ma'am, in the back there? And we're going to go 2.
Dolores Kelly from the
3.
Maryland Senate, and I'm also a lifelong educator. I'm interested in what you can do to highlight best practices in the areas of school choice, especially with charter schools and the role of authorizers.
Okay, right, the gentleman in front of you.
Yes, Henry Moss, Senator from Richmond, Virginia. I'm concerned about the cost of higher education. Specifically, there's a student, hypothetically, is extremely brilliant. He wanted to go to MIT. The cost was $64,000 a year, and his family had to put up $17,000, and the rest of it he had to get loans. But there are 3 younger children coming along. How do you deal with that
Yeah,
situation?
we didn't get to touch on that. And there was one last question we're going to take back here.
Good morning. I'm Rosa Atkins from Charlottesville, Virginia. The President spoke in his State of the Union address about advanced manufacturing. And how do we move that from the adult sector down to the K-12 sector and our partnering with the universities and community colleges? How do we do that quickly?
So quickly, I'm a big believer in good charters. I'm not a big believer in bad charters. And so what we want to do is just replicate those that are successful. So we're putting significant resources to replicate high-performing charters, which I think help. Bad-performing charters need to change or be closed down. Higher education costs, we didn't talk about it. President's proposed $1 billion race to the top for higher education to incentivize 3 things. To incentivize states to invest. 40 states have cut their investment, and when that happens, universities jack up their tuition, to incentivize universities to keep down their costs, and to incentivize universities to build cultures not just around access, which is important, but around completion. The goal is not to go to college, the goal is to graduate. Some universities do a fantastic job there, some frankly don't. So we have a significant, again, carrot play. We played at Race to the Top with early childhood and K-12, haven't played in the higher ed space. Think we have an opportunity to break through there. On the advanced manufacturing, 2 things. The community colleges are a huge part of what we're trying to do, great work going on there, but you also saw in the President's proposal a $300 million item to redesign high schools. And I think this idea of college and careers, I think we've stigmatized the career part of this. And there are so many great jobs out there we need to expose younger students to. So this effort to redesign high schools, yes, with a focus on college, but also with a focus on careers. This is not about tracking, saying you go this way, you go that way, other countries do that. This is about saying we want you to have a multitude of options and figure out where your skills and talents are. We have to bridge that gap. So at the community college level, but also at the high school level, we think we can do a much better job as a nation than we are today.
I'm sorry we've had to go so fast. We could have gone on, I know, much, much longer. Would you all please join me in thanking Secretary Duncan for taking time